Section 3. The benefits of climate change mitigation for children. Section 3 shows how climate change mitigation related actions can impact children, with an emphasis on the benefits of these actions, or so-called co-benefits. It highlights benefits for children from actions designed to reduce greenhouse gas, GHG emissions in specific sectors. It then outlines benefits and risks associated with actions to increase the sinks of GHGs, namely through REDD plus activities, RED plus activities. Ambitious action to cut greenhouse gases will benefit the lives of hundreds of millions of children. The increased concentration of greenhouse gases, GHGs, in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution is the main cause of global warming. Since 1880, the global average temperature has increased by an estimated 0.85 degrees centigrade. Even relatively small changes in temperature and their consequences on the climate system can have major effects on ecosystems, agriculture, water resources, diseases, and human health. As highlighted by the climate scenarios presented in Section 1, a very large number of children will be living in zones where temperature stands to change. Without ambitious action on curbing emissions, more children will be affected. Therefore, policy decisions made today will have an impact on the number of children at risk in the future. Climate change mitigation, GHG emissions by economic sectors. Climate change mitigation is a human intervention to reduce the sources or enhance the sinks of greenhouse gases, GHGs. Agriculture, forestry and other land use. Direct emissions are defined at the point in the energy chain where they are released. Indirect emissions refer to the energy use in end-use sectors. There is a graph, the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report of 2014. Countries have committed under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, also known as the UNFCCC, to act in order to reduce the scope of climate change. This is known as mitigation. The graph shows the sectors that represent the most important sources of GHG emissions, and thus where the mitigation potential is the greatest. Most emissions are energy related. Although mitigation actions usually do not have children in mind, there are many instances where they can also directly or indirectly affect the lives of children. Energy and climate change, energy-related CO2. Energy-related CO2 is the most important GHG, responsible in 2015 for about 63% of emissions. Energy services are essential for human activity as the world's energy demand is expected to increase. Sustainable energy is crucial for our future and plays a key role in children's development and well-being. Access to energy is strongly associated with human and economic development and plays a key role in poverty reduction. If energy needs are not met, this limits production and hampers the fulfillment of basic human needs, such as health and education. Even where energy services are available, energy is often generated from unsustainable sources and applied with inefficient technologies. This leads to waste and pollution and aggravates climate change issues. Therefore, it is important to embrace low-carbon development pathways that also benefit and address the sustainable energy needs of the poor, including disadvantaged children. Sustainable energy for children. Investing in the sustainable energy needs of children can create high returns, particularly in key sectors that have a great influence on development, results among children, and contribute to reducing GHG emissions. Let's click on the electrical stove icon. Household energy. Energy for cooking and heating. In developing countries, energy for cooking and space heating frequently makes up the biggest part of national energy consumption. Energy sources used include biomass, such as firewood and dung, or coal. This poses various issues for children, such as very poor indoor air quality and adverse environmental effects, such as deforestation and GHG emissions. An example of a sustainable energy solution benefiting children is the promotion of more efficient cookers. Let's click on the lamp icon. Household energy. Lighting. Energy is needed for the lighting of homes. Households in areas with no electricity mainly use fuel-based sources for lighting, such as kerosene. Such traditional lighting is not only inefficient and costly, it also produces GHG emissions and exacerbates indoor air pollution. Further, poor lighting at home reduces the time available for children's education. An example of a sustainable energy solution in this sector is the dissemination of solar lamps. Let's click on the hospital icon. Energy for the health sector. Energy plays a key role in the health sector, and significant improvements are associated with reliable access. Electrified hospitals and other health facilities can perform better services, including at night time. This is important in the context of child delivery and correct functionality of medical equipment. An example of a sustainable energy solution in this sector is the use of solar generators. Let's click on the school icon. Energy for the education sector. Energy for lighting and the provision of cooked meals is key to enhancing children's learning experience in schools and vocational institutions, and therefore future employment options and income generation. Information and communication technologies, ICTs, also provide further opportunities and support for teachers. The installation of solar panels is an example of a sustainable energy solution that could power schools. Let's click on the tap icon. Energy for the water sector. Water is needed in the energy production process, and energy is needed to provide people with water. Children's well-being in particular is heavily dependent on the availability of safe water and food security. Furthermore, the hours spent fetching water take away valuable time from girls and women. Solar pumps are an example of sustainable energy solutions that can power the water sector while contributing to mitigating climate change. Let's click on the bus icon. Energy for infrastructure and transportation. Infrastructure is dependent on energy, and the availability of street lighting has a significant impact on children's lives and security. Energy is also needed for transportation. If this is affordable, clean and safe, it can help increase school enrollment rates, particularly in remote areas, as well as generate opportunities for women who can travel more safely and easily. An example of a sustainable energy solution in this sector is the promotion of public transportation. Sustainable energy for cooking, protecting girls. In many places, gender roles dictate that girls and women are responsible for collecting cooking fuel, typically firewood. Firewood collection presents large physical and time burdens. In emergency contexts, girls are also at great risk of sexual violence. Sustainable energy solutions can contribute to girls' well-being and their safety. Case study: Improved Cook Stove Programme in Zimbabwe. This slide presents a project led by UNICEF to support sustainable access to energy, which contributes to GHG emissions reductions and to the health, security and education of children. Issue: exposure to smoke from open fires and cook stoves leads to pneumonia, chronic respiratory disease and lung cancer, causing an estimated 1.6 million deaths worldwide each year. In Africa, 90% of wood removals are used for fuel. In Zimbabwe, 73.9% of households use solid fuels to cook. In 2010, more than 3,000 child deaths between the ages of 0 to 4 years in the country were caused by acute lower respiratory infections. Indoor air pollution from solid fuels is the leading risk factor for acute lower respiratory infections in Zimbabwe. Action. In 2015 and 2016, UNICEF Zimbabwe conducted an improved cook stove program. Women learn to construct the stoves and then go on to train other women. The stoves are cleaner, more efficient, portable, emit less smoke and use less wood. The resources to make the stoves are free and locally available, and their impact is reducing deforestation and respiratory problems. The projects encourage members of the community to conserve their forests, reduce air pollution, and support climate change mitigation. Impact. 3,480 households have been reached so far, approximately 17,400 indirect beneficiaries. The improved cook stove reduces specific fuel consumption by 39%. Non-targeted participants have adopted the improved cook stoves. Children are getting to school on time, spending less time to prepare their food and heat bath water. Mothers are now able to prepare meals for their children while working in the fields using the portable stove. Improved family relations, spending more time together in the kitchen due to more space and less smoke. Case study: reducing emissions and improving children's health in Mongolia. Using more efficient heating stoves. Developing policies to tackle GHG emissions and air pollution. Capacity building and awareness raising. Remember Nandan Erdene from Mongolia? Mitigation measures that could help Mongolia to reduce its GHG emissions can also contribute to addressing the air pollution affecting her health. Using more efficient heating stoves. The use of inefficient heating stoves is an important source of GHG for a household, as well as an important source of air pollution. From 2011 to 2014, the government of Mongolia and the US Millennium Challenge Corporation provided consumer subsidies for the purchase of lower emission stoves for heating. Following the use of such stoves, household emissions across Ulaanbaatar dropped by an estimated 30%, and the incidence of air pollution diseases in children was reduced. Similar projects have been set out in other countries, for example, in Bangladesh. Capacity building and awareness raising. Raising awareness of the issue as well as building capacity to address it, either by teaching households to use more efficient heating stoves or encouraging policymakers to design efficient measures to reduce emissions and air pollution, is an important action that can be undertaken. The Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA, is supporting a capacity building and awareness raising program targeting stakeholders concerned with air pollution control. Developing policies to tackle GHG emissions and air pollution. A proper policy framework is an important mitigation measure that can help to tackle the air pollution problem affecting children. Laws and regulations could facilitate, for example, the transition to less polluting fuels in domestic heating, like gas or liquid fuels, or to reduce emissions from power plants. The United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, has conducted a study to evaluate Mongolia's policy framework on air pollution. Actions undertaken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions can positively or negatively affect children. By trying to reduce the sources or enhance the sinks of greenhouse gases, Countries can implement policies and action that can also have a mixed impact, with some populations negatively affected. REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and the role of conservation, sustainable management of forests, and enhancement of forest carbon stocks in developing countries, is a set of actions that aims to reduce emissions related to forests and enhance forest management in a country. An international mechanism has been under negotiation under the UNFCCC in order to properly value these emissions reductions. The '- icon. When not managed properly, REDD+ projects can also restrict the access of forest-dependent communities, Indigenous peoples and other vulnerable populations, including children, to the forest services on which they depend. The positive icon, or the plus icon. REDD+ can benefit children and other vulnerable populations and communities by providing a financial incentive to avoid forest degradation and thus to sustain the services provided by the forests. Safeguards. Safeguards are elements that must be taken into consideration when devising REDD+ projects to ensure they maximise the benefits and reduce the negative impacts. Examples of safeguards relevant for children, particularly Indigenous children, include respecting the knowledge and rights of Indigenous peoples and members of local communities, and ensuring their full and effective participation. Including children's considerations in climate mitigation planning can maximise the benefits and minimise the negative impacts on children and other vulnerable populations. Although the term safeguards is mostly associated with REDD+, and the subject has been extensively negotiated under the REDD+ workstream at the UNFCCC, the principle, paying special attention to specific elements, including the inclusion of vulnerable populations, such as children, can be integrated into the design of any development activity. UN agencies are increasingly incorporating safeguards in their programs and projects as per the UN framework for advancing environmental and social sustainability. The 2030 Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals specifically refer to reaching out to the furthest first. This agenda is people-centered, gender-sensitive, and has respect for human rights. It has a particular focus on the poorest, most vulnerable, and those furthest behind. Education as a key climate change mitigation strategy. Educating children about climate change can be seen as a mitigation activity, as children are the world's future decision makers and consumers.